Welcome back to Midpoint, and a pleasure to welcome back to the show former presidential candidate, former Republican Congressman Ron Paul joins us on the show. Dr. Paul, good to see you again.
Thank you, Ed. Nice to be with you.
Let's move ahead a little bit, this whole discussion of what's going on here in the last few days with regard to the cases in Ferguson and the case in Staten Island. There absolutely needs to be a discussion here in America about race and about what's happening with police officers. Where do we, in your opinion, go from here in order to try and bring some common sense to this and try to at least take race out of these cases when in many places there is no reason for race or to consider that in the whole discourse?
Well, you'd think we would have arrived there a long time ago, and I think back about all the racism over the centuries have been orchestrated by governments, you know, whether it was slavery or segregation in the military or Jim Crow laws and all these things. But nevertheless, I think it's hard to eliminate it completely. To say there's no racism in police, I think that would be an exaggeration because I believe there's some. And to say that there's no racism involved with the people who commit the violence in the inner city, I think that would be a stretch. I think that we should consider and discuss whether or not we run into many white leaders who are advocating racial strife, like we have Jesse Jackson and a few others, you know, always talking up this, like Al Sharpton. But anyway, racism does exist, but I don't think that's the major problem out there. I've also been one that has maintained that we don't enforce our laws, especially the drug laws, and the punishments have not been evenly distributed between all races, among all nations, all races. So I think there's some there, but I think that would be a minor problem. I think all these problems that we're facing today would be minor, but the one factor that they don't want to talk about and don't seem to talk about, and they don't seem to think it's important, and I think it's the economy. You know, when you have poor people, and then you have people being taught that there's an entitlement system out there. Entitlement means you have a right, and if you have something somebody else doesn't have, there's no guilt associated with this. So I think it's the militarization of the police, and that is a big problem, and the federal government has contributed to that by selling and pushing weapons on the police. And I think there's you know, racism in the inner city, but the economic system is very, very important. I do believe the poor are getting poorer, the middle class is getting wiped out, and there's a misunderstanding. So if there's poor, there's a certain group of people who want to blame successful people, and they claim there's an entitlement. And you put that together, and I think you will elicit and bring up this whole issue of race. But I don't think you can solve the problem of the racial problems that we have without addressing the subject of what creates a sound economy. And I think there's so much discrepancy in the economy that we can't solve our problem unless we talk seriously about a sound economic economy.
A couple things here, only the few minutes that we have left, that I wanted to get your opinion on as well. Ashton Carter is now the Secretary of Defense, as announced today by the President here, or at least his nomination. Do you feel that he is the right guy at the right time, or is he, in your opinion, just going to be another guy who will look at the President, nod his head, and basically live out the rest of the term?
Well, I probably would say that about all the administrations I've been familiar with for a long time. So, yes, he's an interventionist, and some people are going to be very unhappy with him because he's not as aggressive as they would like to be. There are some of us who would like to see a lot less presence around the world and less, you know, stirring up of trouble, whether it's in Syria or Ukraine. And so that he won't please me. So I think that it's not going to work because he's trying to work an unworkable foreign policy, and it's from my viewpoint that the foreign policy is shared, you know, by both parties. Both parties believe in general that we should be involved, and that you know, the military budget never cut back. It's sacred. The military-industrial complex, very influential, and if we don't address that, we're never going to solve the problem. So whether it's Carter or somebody else, this is unmanageable, and we're digging a hole for ourselves because our presence around the world we can't afford anymore. The Soviet system came down not because we had to fight them in a nuclear war. They came down for financial reasons, and there's no way we can sustain our presence around the world and provide all that we're promising that we're going to provide for Ukraine, as well as increase our involvement in Syria and expand our presence there. It can't happen, so we ought to be prepared for a forced change in our foreign policy that all Americans, I believe, will endorse.
And finally, because we only have a few seconds left, how do you feel about Rand maybe still running for president? He says he's going to maybe announce in February.
I guess we'll wait and see. You know, I guess I don't have the answer to that. I think I read the papers that you read.
Absolutely.
But I think it probably would surprise more people that if he didn't run after the, it's pretty obvious when people are sort of preparing. So if he does, I'm sure he'll make an excellent candidate.
Sort of preparing indeed. That's where we're left at this point, and that's just as it should be over the holiday season to give everybody something to talk about. Dr. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. I'll look forward to the next time. And by the way, happy holidays to you and your family.
Same to you. Thank you.
Take care. Short break, and we return with an American return to real space travel. Midpoint continues.